Welcome to GoCast. Today we're happy to have David Décary-Hétu with us. He's a professor at School of Criminology at University of Montreal. For more than 15 years, David has studied the cybercrime, focusing on dark web and how technology affects crime. His work helps us understand the change of the world of cybercrime. David, welcome to the show. Hey, good morning, David. Thank you for being at GoCast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's a great pleasure. I know you've been traveling a little bit, so thank you for doing this morning. Can you just start by telling us who you are, what you do, what you like, where you're from, and so forth, so on?
Sure. My name is David Décary-Hétu. I'm an associate professor at the School of Criminology at the University of Montreal. And I've been doing research into cybercrime for the past, I believe, 15 years now. My first kind of claim to fame was doing research on the dark web as it was kind of growing and becoming a thing in the cybersecurity industry. And ever since, I've been collecting tons of data online, trying to understand the social organization of offenders, how technology impacts crime, and many more really interesting questions around those themes.
Wow, that sounds honestly very, very fun. And what I really like about you is that you're kind of a different piece of the cybersecurity space. We always hear about technology and buy my thing, gonna fix everything, and there's also the we're gonna pen tester stuff, and there's different side of the cybersecurity, but the criminology we don't hear enough, I'd say, in my honest opinion. So if you don't mind, you said dark web, and that dark web thing is seen as the ultimate best thing for the non-technical people, not in cyber people. And for the in cyber people, it's more like okay, dark web. So what's your opinion? Because you've been studying that a lot, right? So what can we find there, and what is interesting and what is not?
So in 2014, I published a paper, and the title was, this paradigm shifting innovation. And we thought the dark web was going to change everything. And in that case, the paper was really on illicit drugs. And so, how would the dark web just change how people buy and sell illicit drugs? But it applies to pretty much any illicit good and service that you can buy online. And we have to remember that the dark web is really just a method to communicate that is going to anonymize your identity and the identity of the person that you're talking with. So it's not kind of this place that you can go to. There's nothing hosted on the dark web. There is stuff that is only accessible if you go through the dark web, but everything is ultimately just hosted on the internet, and there's just different paths to kind of get access to it. And I've been following this for the past 10 years. I've been doing a lot of research on it. And I have to say, unfortunately, it's become quite boring. Over the past few years, we've seen law enforcement target large sections of the people who are using the dark web. And this has created a lot of friction. And people have kind of lost faith a bit into what the dark web could offer them. And there was belief at first that this technology could really protect the identity of the offenders. And I don't think we're really there now. And of course, a lot of groups are still using the dark web. So we can think about, all the ransomware groups. They're not hosting their websites directly on the internet. You have to go through the dark web to access these websites. But fewer and fewer offenders are using the dark web just because it's a lot of hassle and it doesn't bring that many benefits. So might as well, try and use other tools that will protect your identity, maybe as good. So we're seeing a lot of people moving to Telegram over the past few years,
Yeah.
Signal more recently. And yeah, so the dark web is still a thing. It's still something you have to look at, if only to understand this ransomware problem, which has plagued corporations for the past, 10 or 15 years. Uh,
Hmm.
but it may not be top of mind in most cases as it used to be, even if we look back 5 or 6 years ago, when I was really heavy into the dark web, and where all the boards across the world ask their CISO, what
Yeah.
is this dark web thing? And are we covering this?
Yeah. Yeah, and we still hear a lot of people. So, what is about me in the dark web, right? So they want to see or have a one-time picture of what's happening. Big corporation, of course, they want to have a ongoing monitoring to make sure that there's nothing be sold or be leaked under their name. But um, what else can we found, because you've been studying a lot, so because I know for a fact that there's a credential and stuff like that, but any other weirder stuff we can see on the dark web?
I would not recommend that people venture into the weirder stuff there is on there. There's your traditional, hitman. Though there's believed to be two types of hitmen you can hire if you're using the dark web. Either people who will take your money and never kill anyone, or just law enforcement stints. So basically, just fake websites. And when
Hmm.
you try and kill someone, law enforcement shows up at your door. So you have to remember that it's very easy to create, just a page that will advertise certain products. But we do see still the dark web being used a lot in the counterfeit industry. So basically, if you want to buy counterfeit purses, I know Christmas is coming up. Everything is so expensive now. Counterfeits are said to be almost as good as the real thing and produce, in the same factories as the real stuff.
Hmm.
So counterfeit is still very big. Illicit drugs, and as you mentioned, I think everything around stealer logs, stolen identity, it's still very easy to purchase these information on there. Though the main question is, do you need the dark web for this, or are there other alternatives? As I mentioned before, I mean, we've seen Telegram become very popular,
Yeah.
especially with all the automation and the bots that you can automate on Telegram. And basically, you just say, I would like to have a stolen identity from someone in Quebec, from someone in Missouri, preferably a woman, between 20 and 35. And they'll just send you the information, you pay with Bitcoin, and you're kind of done with it.
Yeah.
But so there is still a lot of activity, but I would say that it's kind of spread around different channels. And the dark web is still something we very much need to pay attention to. But in today's world, I believe that this is where you need to look at GitHub, which has so much information that is
Yeah.
published in there, the dark web, the regular internet, Telegram. It's becoming more and more difficult for CISOs to try and have kind of a 360 view of what are the threats, what are people saying about my community, my company, and my industry, because that's also something that's of interest to people.
Yeah, true, and that is a concern for those who have a CISO, because a lot of companies don't even have a CISO yet. You said something very interesting about Telegram having some kind of automation and stuff. We are in the actual Gen AI bubble, right? So we've seen tons of different bubble. Even the TV was a bubble at some point. So now it's the Gen AI. And what do you see between those? Automation and crime, the rise of the crime and the AI being so open now. Have we see some shift between what it was to what it is now?
Um, I would say there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we're still lacking deeper research, and that be something that people should look into and pay more attention to. We've seen examples of AI being used, for example, for sending spam messages, even spear phishing. If you want to contact someone and you want to have a very good email, so you can say, write this email as a Cisco employee would, and
Yeah,
it probably knows about Cisco employees and will probably be able to send something that will be seen as real. So we're seeing all these evidence and all these examples of AI being used. We're also seeing, if you want to create just a fake website, it's becoming easier and easier to use these tools. So you just give it, a bank's website and you say, I would like to have a similar website. Can you code this for me and make these changes? So the AI are getting quite good at these very simple kind of programmation tasks. But we really haven't seen kind of the breakthrough kind of method, tool, or kind of feature that is
yeah,
going to change the cybercrime world. But as we're seeing for us, it's incremental. There's a million different small things it can do, and the offenders are going to be using the same tools as we do.
yeah.
And yeah,
Of course, very true. David, you're just back from the Netherlands. What was the event you went?
I went to the Illicit Networks workshop. So this was a 14th year we're having this event, and it's very interesting because uh, the aim of this conference is to study, use, and talk about social network analysis. And it's a completely different way of seeing the world when you're with these people. So, in the cybersecurity industry, very often we'll be talking about systems, we'll be talking about, access control. Uh, but there's a different way of seeing the world, which is all about networks. So it doesn't matter who you are, it just matters who you know. And looking at these connections, and you can see some parallel even with the technical stuff where you don't even need to know what people are doing on computers. All you need to know is which system is connected to what other system and how they're communicating. And just looking at these patterns of communication will give you a wealth of information about who's doing what, who may have been infected. And so we just geek out on, networks. How can we model these networks? And in this case, very quickly, I presented an analysis of the breach forum. So I'm sure
Yeah,
most people are familiar with the breach forum, where you could actually buy just stolen data sets. And there was a feature on this website where people could report other members of the community, and they could say, hey, this person is spamming, this person spread malware, this person used my name. And so we looked at all the conflict management within this forum. And basically, we looked at what happened once someone reported someone else. And depending on if how close they were to the administrators and the moderators of the forum, they either got no sanction, they were warned, or they were
yeah,
banned from the community. And we clearly demonstrated there was huge bias. And so basically,
yeah, of
if
course.
you're friends with the administrators, you can do whatever you want and you'll never get banned. And so this raises a lot of question about how these communities operate, how
Yeah.
much friction is going to be in them. And I thought it was just an interesting take on this forum.
Very, very, because you add human and crime and cyber, and it's a really interesting cocktail.
Yeah.
Uh, cool. Speaking of community, you are obviously one of the biggest player in the Montreal community with the B side,
Yeah.
Montreal, I'd say. Um, if you have to get let's say aware of what's happening, what would be your go-to in terms of event? And I'm speaking in the world, right, not specifically in Montreal, but in the world, what is your go-to to be updated and stay I guess.
It really depends on what you want to learn, what you're interested in. We're seeing a lot of very good and amazing conferences all over the world. Of course, being one of the co-organizer of the B-Side Montreal, I'll just tell people about the B-Sides, which is kind of a brand where anyone can just organize their own B-Sides in their own city. But they're mostly very interesting, I would say, and they vary from 40 people all the way up to 3,000 people. So there's very small and large ones.
Yeah,
Um,
and the story behind B-side, I don't know if you're aware of Jack Daniel. Of course you are, because you're hosting one of the chapter. But Jack Daniels, not the one producing the whiskey, but another one, was I think they were a couple being refused at the RSA conference a couple of years ago, and they decided, well, of course we're not quality enough to be at that big conference, but they decided to create that B side of the RSA conference. So that's a really really cool story. I'm not sure everyone knows about that, where it's really the B side of the RSA, where it started in San Francisco, and now there's what, how many you said? It's more than 300. It's probably like, I don't
yeah,
remember how many B side there is, but yeah.
maybe 100 or 200. There's a lot of popping up all over India right now,
Yeah.
and the UK as well. Um, but the best conferences are, I think, the ones that I thought were extremely interesting, that people may not know about. There's BotConf
Mhm.
in France, and it's all about botnets. And I have seen some stellar research over there. people spending months or years just dissecting all the botnets, and it's a bit more technical conference. But there was one guy presenting the evolution of a botnet over, I think it was 10 or 12 years, and showing the 120 different versions of the botnet, dissecting every one of them, showing the trends. So very in-depth research that has just been fantastic. And it's always in a nice setting. There's always an oyster bar during the conference dinner, so it's always nice.
Cool. Nice.
And people, just elite people from all over the world. So if you're into botnet, I would say that that's a very nice conference. And I've had the chance to speak twice at the Hope conference in New York as well,
Okay.
who may not be getting all the credit that it deserves. So it's the Hackers of Planet Earth conference, and always kind of a more old school kind of vibe to it, and
Yeah.
organization, and a bit more dedicated to kind of privacy, protecting people's lives, but also very in-depth research, and not as crazy as Black Hat can be in
Yeah.
into New York. So it's also maybe a bit more quiet. So as we're getting older, maybe we don't want all this craziness that comes with Black Hat and DEF CON.
Yeah.
But Hope is something to look at. It's in the middle of the summer, so it's always kind of a nice break mid-year. And the talks are incredibly nice, very technical once again, and it has what every conference should have, which is a Hackers Got Talent contest.
Oh
And so
wow.
the
That's
the
cool.
Saturday night, I have seen some weird stuff in my life, but this just beat everything. So you have to be there around 11 p.m. Saturday night. I mean, it's pretty
Oh, I
nice.
think I'll definitely add that to my list. I've been collecting, lanyard
Yep.
and stuff for so long now. I have my VEFCON 16 badge, very old school. Where that year we had, well, they always have a team or something, but they were recommending people to have a mohawk. Blue mohawk at the time. I remember the concept of goons. It's really interesting. I think you have to go there once in your life
Yeah.
to understand how it does work. Yeah. Um, David, last question. Because thank you again for your time. It is a really, really interesting conversation, and I think we could take that conversation for an whole hour. But I won't keep you a prisoner of that. But what would you say to David 20 years ago in cyber before all of the big hype gets in? And
I would say that the maybe the one thing that strikes me now is how everything changes so fast, and sometimes you'll see people or myself just invest very deeply into a topic, which is nice and interesting, but no matter what you're studying, it's going to be gone very quickly. And this industry, you have to be extremely agile. You have to be able to switch very quickly to a different topic. You have
that,
uh, and it's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because as soon as you get comfortable with something, and let's just say Telegram, you're roaming Telegram, you're trying to understand what's going on in there, the owner gets arrested, and then everyone's moving to another platform
mhm,
where the codes are going to be different, the way things are done are going to be different, and just knowing that there's going to be very little rest, and you're always going to be kind of chasing what's going on, trying to understand the latest trend. I think I was expecting this to be kind of a bit of a slower process, but what I'm seeing is everything just changes so fast.
yeah.
And if you can't deal with it, you have to get out of the kitchen, basically.
True, absolutely true. Well, thank you very much, David, and I wish you a good rest of your day.
Thank
And
you.
see you soon.
Cheers.